and this was my old garden that I had, and I garden in raised garden planters behind my garage, because that's my spot that I have to garden. Now, if you live in an apartment or a condominium and all you can do is pots, then great. You know, we can grow in anything that we can put soil in. So if you don't have an expansive row garden, we can still garden. And you can see how shady my garden is at that time. That was for my winter garden. That's the overall with all my leafy greens. And these were in wooden garden boxes pre-Harvey. I had to upgrade after Harvey. This is the winter after Harvey. Harvey finished off my wooden garden boxes, which my wooden garden boxes lasted for about 12 years. And then Harvey just made them completely rot out. So I had to upgrade, and I upgraded to the galvanized feed troughs that are bottomless. And I love that because this is going to last me forever. So just a little background of where I garden there. So we need to know where we're going to garden in your yard. Are we going to garden in pots, or are we going to garden in raised garden beds like I do? Or are we going to garden straight into the flower bed? Because that's how we need to determine what soils we're going to use. And soil is the most important part of our garden. So we want to make sure that we invest in good soil so that we can have good success. So I put on there, don't buy cheap dirt, because we want to garden in soil. We don't want to garden in dirt. And buy the right soil for what you're doing. So if you're going to garden in pots, use a potting soil. They're engineered to be in a pot so they don't decompose further, okay? It's just very frustrating when you put a composted soil in a pot and your plants start to disappear over time. They shrink down in the pot. So use a high quality potting soil. And in your flower beds, you just amend with a high quality compost. And like Nature's Way compost, that's one of our favorites. Danny and I talk about it all the time on the radio show. So adding some leaf mold compost to your garden beds is very beneficial. And then if we're gardening in raised beds and you're building your garden, like my gardens that I have, we're building, that would be very expensive to fill it full of pure compost. So we want to put a garden mix in, and then we want to amend with a high quality compost. So I just took a picture of this, 3 different soils. The top soil up there is what we commonly refer to as topsoil. The middle picture is compost. It's nice and dark and rich compared to that topsoil, which is very dusty and sandy and kind of deplete looking. And the bottom picture is of a raised garden bed that has some compost in it. It's already in a bag to go into your garden beds. So how I built my beds and how I tell my customers to build their beds is to bulk up with the garden mix and to amend with a high quality compost on the top, okay? So that's the most important part of figuring out where you're going to garden, how you're going to garden. Are we going to do pots, containers, or right into the ground? So right into the ground, you would just add compost. Sorry. Right in the ground, we'd add compost. In raised beds, we would do a mixture of a garden blend and compost. And I wish everybody would just omit topsoil from their vocabulary, because it is it's great for filling in holes, but we don't want to grow plants in that. We want a very good quality compost to grow our plants in. So that's a little bit about soil to get started. And then we want to know what to expect. And I think the expectations are really important when we're growing a vegetable garden, because people come into the nursery at the end of March and April, or mostly the end of April, and they're like, I want to do strawberries and tomatoes. Well, we need to know that the later you start your garden, you're not going to have as good a results with some plants. So we need to know that tomatoes, once we start getting warm, they're going to stop setting fruit. Okay, so know what to expect there. Know that your lettuce and your leafy greens are going to become aphid magnets when we get really hot. know that once we get hot and humid, you become a little bit more susceptible to different diseases. So we need to know what to expect with our garden, adjust our expectations, and kind of go from there. And that kind of goes into our next key to success, which is timing is everything. So I made this little cheat sheet, and I have it on my website, but it's a vegetable and herb growing guide. And I adapted this from my knowledge here and the vast knowledge of Bob Randall with Urban Harvest. He is like the go-to on vegetable gardening in Houston. And I took his knowledge because he's I-10 and south, and we're up north, northwest Houston. So I took the information that I knew and I put it into a veggie and herb guide. And so this has timing, when we're supposed to start planting certain vegetables, and which ones you start from seed and which ones you're going to start from plants. So I use this still after 25 years of gardening here. I still refer to this just to keep me on track so that I have good success. If we start our tomatoes too late from seeds, we won't have success, and we want to have success. So timing is key. And some things I like to start from transplants, and some things I like to start from seed. I can tell you my summertime garden or my spring summer garden, I always start my tomatoes and peppers from transplants, which are the little plants that you buy at the store. And then I start everything else from seed, right in the garden, right where I want it to grow. So I'm not having to start plants inside and transplant them out. Okay, and then I wanted to touch on, before I start talking about specific vegetables to grow, talking about targeted pest control. Because when people are starting to vegetable garden, they're very concerned about insects. And they want to know what they can spray to control insects. And so I am not a fan of putting insecticides out unless they are needed. And we want to be very targeted when we're treating insects. We want to target the life stage that's doing damage. For instance, tomato hornworms or different little caterpillars. We want to put something out that's only going to take care of your tomato hornworms or your caterpillars, which we're seeing a lot of caterpillars. So we want to target the life stage that is doing the damage. And so something like this dipel dust, which is Bacillus thuringiensis, you can use. It's going to target that specific life phase of that insect without hurting any of your beneficials, which that's what we want. We want to have as many beneficials involved to take care of the bad bugs. We don't want to put just a blanket control of insecticides out in our yards, especially in our vegetable gardens, if we don't need them. So, because we're growing our vegetables because we want to have healthier food, right? And so we don't want to use a lot of chemicals. And I can tell you from my experience in my garden, I very seldom, if I have good soil, good watering practices, and my timing is right, I have very few insect infestations. Because when our plants get an insect problem, it's usually a stress response. They're putting out a stress pheromone that says to the insects, come put me out of my misery. And so if you have multiple plants with many different insect problems, we've got to look at what's the stress. Is there some, if you have a watering problem, are you watering too much? Are you watering too little? Is the soil just not right, or is it a nutrient deficiency? So we've got to figure out what the stress is and kind of reverse that before we just start spraying a bunch of insecticides. Okay, so things that we can start planting now that we figured out where we're going to garden, we've got our soil figured out. And just FYI, I don't know where everybody's viewing from, but if you're in the greater Houston area, plug into one of the Home Show Garden Pro co-op nurseries, because that's what we do. This is what we do every day. We love what we do, and plug in with them because they'll have the high quality products that you need to have the best success. So find whichever home show is close to you and plug in with them. And I'm always available through email and Facebook to help everybody figure out what the right product is. So now we're going to start planting, and all of the things listed on here, we pretty much still have time for. Tomatoes, we're starting to get a little bit late. But everything else on here we can get started with. And most everything, with the exception to the tomatoes and peppers, I would go ahead. If you don't want to do the transplants, go ahead and start from seed. So I just kind of went through each plant that you could start. So cantaloupes are always fun. And you saw in my garden, I don't have a lot of space. So my cantaloupe, I actually have to grow vertically. I grow it on a cattle fence, and I grow it up. I just let it start attaching, and it grows beautifully. Cantaloupes want to be watered regularly, but very well drained while they're growing. Now, once we set the fruit, we want to back off water. We don't want to overhydrate these little guys, because then you'll have a water-filled fruit that isn't very flavorful. A little whimsy for your garden. You'll have to, if you're growing them vertically, you will have to provide some kind of a support. So I've used pantyhose. I haven't used the brassiere like in the picture on the right, but desperate times call for desperate measures. And if you have two strategically placed cantaloupes, then why not, right? Sorry, I have something popping up on my screen here. Okay. And okay, so that's cantaloupes. You just got to plan for space with these guys. I always plant them right in the garden from seed, right where I want them to grow, and plan for support. Plan what you're going to either let them climb up on, or if you have the space, if you have a vast vegetable garden, then let them crawl and let them go. But they'll do like a ground cover, and then the melons will hang out on the mulch, and just put something like pine needles or something under them. Bush beans are one of my favorites. I'm really big on bush beans. I don't do as many pole beans just because of my space. Bush beans are really cool to plant from seed. You can overplant these. You can plant a ton of them in a tight space. So if you have a little person helping you garden, and they're helping you plant seeds, and they kind of go crazy with your bean seeds, it's okay if they don't get your measurements or your spacing just perfect. You have about a 50 to 60 days until harvest on these guys. So a pretty quick crop. They germinate fast. So like I said, if you have little people you're gardening with, it's great. You'll go out one day and you'll have a ton of beans on your plant. And so you'll have enough to do something with, where pole beans, I don't do in my garden, because I'd have to plant so many of them to have enough to do like canning and freezing with. You can or can't, you don't have to use a seed inoculant. Usually if you're using a really high quality soil, it'll have enough mycorrhizae fungi in it. And a good high quality plant food like the MicroLife Ultimate is my favorite to use in my garden. Then you don't have to add a seed inoculant. And most of our packaged seeds are pre-inoculated anyways. Okay, burpless cucumbers. Burpless cucumbers are my favorite. They're the long, skinny ones. You can harvest them at 6 to 8 inches. They may become seedy if you let them go too long, but the day of planting, know how you're going to grow these guys, because they want to grow up on a vine. So expect to have some kind of a trellis structure for your burpless cucumbers. The cotyledon, which is that leaf that you see, it's the outside of the seed when it opens up. If you taste that and it's bitter, then start over, because it's never going to get any better than that. So that's a good way to, it's nothing more frustrating than having the space in the garden, growing a cucumber that your neighbor gave you seeds for, and then you taste the cucumber and it's very bitter. So you can avoid that by tasting the cotyledon when you plant it from seed. Okay, edamame is a really easy crop, and it likes it hot and dry. So edamame is super cool. You plant them from seed right in the garden. When the plant, it'll grow, it'll set the little pods, and then the tops will kind of start to die back a little bit, and then you know that the pods are ready to harvest. I go kind of crazy with this because we like to can and freeze and save the edamame, the soybeans. Eggplant, very easy. I have transplants for this. It just depends on how much you like eggplant, and that's just one of those things that not everybody is a fan of. So starting from seed or from transplant would be sufficient. Um, Determine if it's ripe. You lightly press the side of the fruit. You put your fingernail right in that little side of the fruit, and if the indentation stays, then the fruit is ready. And if it plumps right out, it's not quite ready yet. So that's how you know how this is ready. I like to cage my eggplant the day I plant it because it does grow fast. And I use a small cage on my eggplant for support. And the reason I do that is because I have the raised gardens. My plants get kind of high. They get loaded with fruit. If we have a heavy wind or downburst wind, my whole plant's going to fall over. And then it destroys the plant. So that's why I cage my eggplant the day I plant. So many different varieties that you could do, your long skinny Japanese kind, your big whopper classic kind. So I usually do the big whopper for more like eggplant parmesan type of meals. But don't go up and pull the fruit. So if you have little ones helping you, don't let them just go up and pull the fruit. Get something and snip the fruit off the plant, because if you just go pull, they're pretty much attached on there even when they're ripe, and you might end up breaking the plant. Okra, and this really, how much okra you plant depends on how much you really like it. Okra produces a ton of fruit on the plant. And I like to tell people, visit your okra plants twice a day, because that okra may be an inch and a half in the morning and you come home from work and it's all of a sudden it's like 6 inches long. So visit your okra plant twice a day. Pick them when they're 3 to 4 inches long before they get really hard and spiny. Okay, sweet potatoes. We'll have the slips of the sweet potatoes in soon. The slips on the top left picture, we'll get bunches of the slips. You can get an organic sweet potato and grow slips on your own, or you could buy them from a nursery. Sweet potatoes are just that one plant that you plant and you just walk away. About 100 days later, you can just start digging. It can take it hot and dry. We usually bring these in at the end of this month, but you can grow these in a pot, which I highly recommend doing your sweet potatoes in a pot. I did put some in one of my garden beds, and I am having a heck of a time getting it out. It has grown down into the crushed granite surface below. So I'm constantly getting a regrowth of sweet potatoes, which is fun, but I like to alternate my crops each season, and I always have sweet potatoes come back in that bed. So it kind of interferes with my tomatoes in that bed. Summer squash. So we are right on time for summer squash right now, and you can still do seeds. You can hopefully plant these guys late to try to avoid the squash vine borer, which I know Danny and I have talked about these. There's many different methods to go about avoiding squash vine borers or treating squash vine borers. I'll show you pictures of what these squash vine borer damage looks like. But you also want to plant more than one summer squash. Like if you do zucchini, plant more than one zucchini to ensure that you have males and females open. And what I mean by that is, let me see, here's our male and female. I'll go back to that other slide. That's something that a lot of people don't realize, that some of your fruits have male and female flowers. The female on your squash plants and your cucumbers, top left, you can see the female looks like she's got a baby squash attached to her, and the flower comes out of the end. And then the male flower it comes off on a stem. So you have to have male and females open to have fruit set. If you go out and you have a bunch of males open and no females present, that's completely normal usually early in the season. I always say the males are early to the party, the females will come later. But if you have a bunch of males open, you won't ever have a fruit. So you just got to sit tight and wait for the females to open. Now, let's just say you have males and females open at the same time and you're still not having fruit set. You may have to self-pollinate they need a lot of bee activity to pollinate. So the bottom right picture is a picture of pollinating. You pick the male flower off, pull the petals back, have the stamen there, and then go touch it to the female pollen, and that's how we self-pollinate. I'll go back to this slide here, and this is different problems that we can have. So you can have blossom end rot, and where you have poor fruit development on its own, or you can have the poor fruit development because of the squash vine borer. And you can see the squash vine borer gets into the stem of the vine, and it just bores through, making that frass. And it just tears it up. You'll go out in the morning, your plants will be perky, and by the end of the day, they look like flat tires from the heat stress, like on the bottom right picture. And you water it, and they just stop perking up little by little. And you look at the stem, and you see the vine borers. So Danny's fix to this is really cool, and I'm going to try it this year, is pile compost on top whenever you see your plants reacting like this. And they should recover. In his experience, that's what's happened. So I'm going to try that this year because that would be easy to do. Just put a real high quality compost right on top of those stems. Some people inject BT with a hypodermic needle. That sounds like a lot of work to me. Bob Brandel had said just plant way more than you'll ever need, and then the bugs won't find every stem. And so that's been my go-to, and I'll go out and I'll see a few plants that have been infected with the vine borers, and then I will pull those plants. I will cut the stems off and put them in a baggie in the trash. I'll compost the rest of the plant. So that's how I've been handling that. So winter squash, a lot of people forget about winter squash, but we have to plant that in the summer. So look at your veggie guide. If you print this one out from our website, that's great. Buy Bob Randall's book, get your timing down so that you don't miss out on crops like the yummy winter squash and even pumpkins. You want to have pumpkins ready for Halloween, you've got to plant them in July, August timeframe. And also, you see the expansive growth of these pumpkins. Now, you can grow those up like your cantaloupe too. Or if you have the room to let them go, it's kind of fun to see who's, if you're gardening with kids, see whose vine makes it the farthest. That's kind of fun to do too. Okay, and then tomatoes. I'm just going to touch on tomatoes because that's everybody's most favorite thing to grow. I always tell myself I'm only going to put 4 to 5 tomatoes in. I'm up to 12. I'm almost out of room in my garden for everything else. So I plant tomatoes from transplants because I don't always want to do the same type of tomato. I want to diversify what tomatoes I'm doing. So I will buy one of each one that interests me on the tables. Now, right now, it is too late to start your tomatoes from seed to have success this season, okay? If you want to start tomatoes from seed for a fall garden, you certainly can. And like July, get your seeds started and then transplant out in August. But right now, you still have time if the weather cooperates. That's the whole expectation thing, right? If you run into the nursery this weekend and purchase some tomatoes, you will have some success, but you're not going to have as good a success if you would have started. I always start the last week of January and protect my tomatoes. So that's too risky for some people, so they wait till the first week of March. So know that you can still have success with tomatoes, but you'll have better success if you start at the right time. So fall planting, we're going to sow our seeds June, July, and we're going to move them out in August. And you can have a whole nother crop. Sometimes I have fresh tomatoes all the way through Christmas and even New Year's if we don't have a freeze. Tomatillos, plant more than one. These are great for salsa. They're fun to watch. They're pretty little flowers. They look like little lanterns. But cage them at the time of planting because they're very fragile and they grow really fast. Plant more than one. You want 2 so they can cross-pollinate with each other so you'll have more tomatillos. And watermelon. Watermelon, again, like your cantaloupe, you can grow that vertically, and I have done it just to prove that it can be done. I have grown my big crimson sweet watermelon vertically. It was a booger to keep it supported. But we used to have a little chain link fence to keep the dogs out of the garden, and I did it on the chain link fence. And it did grow, and it was great. It got a little longer than if it was laying on the ground. But make sure that as we get close to maturity, that you back off the water so it doesn't get overhydrated. Okay, and now we get into questions. And also, I wanted to touch on basic care and maintenance of your vegetable garden. So let's say you've planted your garden, you've got your plants in, you're going, everything is hunky-dory. How do you care and maintain for these plants? We want to fertilize at the time of planting. And I know Sarah's on here and Mike's on here, but this is my favorite veggie plant food right here. The MicroLife Ultimate 846. This is loaded with minerals and nutrients that are going to be great for all your vegetables and flowers. And it's got a high calcium in it, so hopefully we don't have issues with blossom end rot on different things. But I always plant my plants, and I include that in the hole when I plant. And then we want to repeat the fertilization on these plants about every month. So you'll re-fertilize. Now, if we're doing small pots, you're going to do it a little more frequently. If we're doing like the big garden beds, I go out every probably 6 to 8 weeks and I fertilize. So that's the fertilization that I do. I also do liquids. I love doing liquids because I feel like liquids kind of get you out, and every Friday night I'll get out. I always say I end Fridays with a glass of wine in one hand and a sprayer with seaweed in the other hand. So liquid seaweed is great to use at the time of planting your garden as a root stimulator, but it also goes right in through the cell layers of the leaf, making your plants less desirable to sucking insects. Things like spider mites don't like the way this makes your plants taste, and it kind of thickens up the cell walls so their little mouth parts can't penetrate as easily. So that's what I do is just a little pop-up sprayer. I get out, I mist my plants, I'm looking at them, I'm looking for caterpillars, I'm looking for snails and slugs, watching for problems every Friday. So that's how I end my Friday. As far as watering goes, invest in a good water wand or a way to water. I'm not a huge fan of doing a sprinkler system on a vegetable garden because most of your veggies don't want overhead watering, and especially when we're wet and we're high humid and we're hot, we don't want to do a lot of overhead watering. So like a water wand like this allows you to stand and get down at the soil level. Another way to cut back on a lot of the fungal problems that we could have in our gardens is use a good mulch top dressing. Danny uses leaves, I use pine needles. Either way is good. Both are going to decompose over time and amend your soil or add good nutrients to your soil. So if you're putting a good layer of some kind of an organic mulch down, that will keep your soil from splashing up on your leaves of your plants. So that will help with fungal control. Okay, so Danny, are you going to come back on?
Yes, I am back on. So now is the time where we would encourage y'all to ask questions. You can unmute yourself and ask a question, or you can put it in the chat and ask a question. So looks like we already have.
Do they need to raise their hands?
I think that they can just unmute themselves and ask the question.
Okay.
I think that should work. If you want to raise your hand, that totally works for me. Not on the video, there's a little button that says raise your hand. So I'm actually going to go to the big split screen here. Okay, so Jenny does ask, are chickens in any way helpful to vegetable gardening? So what's your take on chickens used in vegetable gardening?
Well, so I've never gardened with chickens, but I definitely have friends who have chickens. Now, chickens can destroy a vegetable garden by picking the leaves. They like to eat the leaves. Now, if you can kind of contain them to certain areas and let them hang out and eat and poop, they will eat bugs and they will poop, which adds fertilizer to the ground, that is beneficial. They do eat bugs off of your plants. You just have to watch them and know what your chickens like to eat. But I've had people where the chickens have gotten in the garden and destroyed their garden. So Danny will know more about this in a few weeks when he's rescuing chickens on what they like to eat. But I do know they are a heck of a insect control.
Yeah, it looks like Tim Johnson has a question. Tim, you want to ask your question?
Yes, you were talking about watering system and sprinklers. Do you prefer the wand over a soaker system, or any concerns about a soaker?
I think if you have a really good soaker and you monitor its output, then you can have success. Me personally, I like to get out and water, and I'm amazed at how little that we actually do need to water. When you have a really good organic soil, you're not going to have to water as much. But I like to get out and be in control of the water. Maybe I'm a control freak. But soaker systems are beneficial if used appropriately. Just like a sprinkler system, if used correctly, is a helper. I still like to get out and make eye contact and make sure things, because sometimes your output's different and maybe getting overwatered in one spot and underwatered in another spot. So yes, I am a fan of soaker systems, but monitored.
Thank you.
So great. Okay, thank you so much. That's a great thought. Sorry.
That's great.
All right, so great. So Ginny, did you have a follow-up question about the chickens? I noticed you're unmuted.
Oh no, I'm just thinking. Well, yes. What do you mean you're getting rescue chickens?
So I connected with some people who rescue
you're
chickens.
Muted. You're muted, Danny.
I'm muted. Am I? Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Organization that actually finds birds that are kind of unproductive in farm factory settings, and they're going to throw them away, and you can rehabilitate them. And so we made a little 2 chicken coop. So as I learn more about it, I think it's pretty hard. It sounds like it's pretty heartbreaking, but we do dogs, so cats. So why not try chickens? So at least they'll do some weeding for us, maybe. Yeah. Okay. So we have a couple of other questions. If you have a question, we'd love to hear it. Richard Sinta says, I bought 2 small fig trees 2 years ago and put them in plenty of good soil and fertilizer, but they haven't grown that much. What am I missing? How can they grow faster into a real tree?
Okay. So this is where putting my eyes on it or putting eyes on it would be beneficial so we can kind of see the overall health of the tree. I'm not sure why it's not growing. Is it a variety that stays dwarf? There's one called Little Miss Figgy, so it could be a variety issue. Little Miss Figgy is a dwarf type, so that could be one reason. But if we knew more about the variety and could maybe get some pictures, then we could probably help you more. But my fig tree, for instance, liked a evenly moist soil, but very well drained. And I actually had to end up ripping it out because it was getting too big for my backyard. So if we could see pictures of it, that would definitely help.
Yeah, you know, I've seen a lot of figs. Yeah, seen a lot of figs too, kind of really just pause for a while and then explode. So I wonder if that's just what Richard needs to just wait. Maybe put some fertilizer on there. We did have someone.
Some Microlife Ultimate and some liquid seaweed. Might stimulate some root. Yeah.
Hey, we did have someone ask. You mentioned a fertilizer for tomatoes, and also we have Laura Neff is bringing up insects problems with tomatoes. So maybe touch on what you feel like the best fertilizer is for tomatoes, and then insect problems on tomatoes.
So 2-step with the tomatoes, the Microlife Ultimate right here, and then liquid seaweed. At the time of planting, use both of them, and do the liquid in the watering can and the granule at the root system, and then do a spray once a week with the liquid seaweed. And then about every 4 to 6 weeks, reapply the granules of the Microlife Ultimate. That's my favorite way to go about feeding my tomatoes. And then we get into insects, and I really have very few insect problems. Tomato hornworms tend to be the worst problem on the tomatoes. Tomato hornworms and leaf-footed bugs. So tomato hornworms, you'll see eating, usually on the tops. You'll go out and you're like, where's all my leaves? Usually you can pull them off if you have a ton of them and you just feel like you can't keep up with pulling the caterpillars off. Then you would use something like this dipel dust, which is Bacillus thuringiensis. It's completely safe biological insecticide. You can dust that on and that'll protect the plants, and it's targeted towards that caterpillar. The next problem that I could see being an issue would be the leaf-footed bugs, which we call them stink bugs here in Texas. They're not the same stink bug as up north, but they're the big armored bug, and they're little nymphs. The baby stink bugs is when you want to try to control them, and that's where the getting out in your garden every week, making eye contact and really paying attention to what's happening on your plants comes into play. So if you get out in your garden and you see a cluster of little orange-bodied bugs, like all over the fruit or gathered on a leaf, then you want to get out and spray those. And I like to use something like this takedown garden spray. And I'm real picky with things that you're going to use on your plants. You want to use stuff that's going to be safe, that's not going to poison the plant for a long time. But this is pyrethrin and a mineral oil. And you want to spray those little leaf-footed bug nymphs before they get that hard armor on their body. Once they get that hard armor, it's really hard to control them with a spray. So they're clustered, they're orange bodies, long black legs. They kind of hang out in a herd. They're herbivores. They like to eat your fruit, right? So they kind of hang out together. There is a life phase of the assassin bug that looks very similar to that stage of the leaf-footed bug nymph, but it never hangs out in a cluster. So that's how you know the difference between the good bug and the bad bug. The bad bugs that are going to eat your plants hang out together. They're like a herd, like cows chewing on grass. They're eating on your plants, right? The beneficial insect, the assassin bug, which eats other bugs, it's a carnivore. It eats other bugs. It doesn't want to hang out together. So that's kind of how you know the difference between the leaf-footed bug nymph and a baby assassin bug. So you know which ones to kill and which ones not to kill. So like I said, the leaf-footed bugs hang out in a cluster, like they're all over each other. The assassin bugs hang out by themselves. They're loners because they don't want to hang out with other bugs that are going to eat them.
They're predators.
So those are the two biggest problems that I find on tomatoes. Occasionally you'll have somebody with aphids, sometimes little different caterpillars, but that really just needs to be addressed. If you have the problem, don't try to prevent the problem by spraying insecticides, because I feel like when you go out and spray an insecticide, you kill more beneficials and then you get more bug problems.
Yeah, I do know that the leaf-footed bugs kind of drop as their escape method. And so that's one thing. If you see one on there and you kind of get close to it and it drops down a limb, that's a good sign. People also will use a bowl of a soapy water to knock them into, and that's another way. If you have a very small infestation. But we also have some Home Show Garden Pro listener questions. And so as we're kind of continuing to take questions, we're going to kind of go onto them. And so this next question from a listener is, you can see it there. I have 2 salvia indigo spires. As soon as I unload them, they begin wilting. I planted them using organic soil, compost, and food. No change. What do I do next? I can speak that Tim planted them in pea gravel. So just another bit of information there.
Okay, so you bring them home and they're wilted, and you plant them and you feed them. You know, those little plants come in this little square pot with a peat-based soil that if it gets really dry, and coming from the store to your house, it probably just dried out if it wasn't wet when you left the store. And then that soil almost becomes hydrophobic. And so to re-wet it, you've got to really focus on that root ball. That's my best guess. Like I said, without seeing it, I'm guessing. So it's always good to get somebody's eyes on it, or pick that plant up and feel what's happening at that root system, since it's that new to your garden. So, food's not going to bring it out of a wilt. It's going to be water related one way or the other.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great one. Richard has a question. I did kind of answer it on the chat a little bit, but this is on the chat. It says, is there a list of organic farms that sell veggies and fruits around Houston, since most of the farmers markets are closed for now? I'm not going to pose that question to Sherri, but I'm going to pose that to the community that's on here. Please post in the chat if you know any great farms that sell veggies and fruits around Houston. So that's just for Richard there. Okay. This one's from Lauren in Magnolia. I'm installing 10 inches deep raised beds. What is the soil? Oh, nice, a veggie question. That's great. What is the soil to compost percentage mix for the beds? Will I need to add fertilizer?
Okay, so the compost percentage, raised bed, what is the soil compost percentage mix for beds? Okay, so I would say a 3-to-1 would be, if you're using bag materials or yards of soil, a 3-to-1 ratio would be ideal. So let's just say you're doing a garden mix and a compost, 3 bags of garden mix to 1 bag of compost is how I build my beds. And then the next season, when you pull everything out of your garden beds and you want to add more, just add more compost. And then over time, it'll just really improve your soil. And yes, you need to use fertilizer, especially as hot as we get and as much as we have to water and as we get warmer. All your nutrients will flush, because we're doing in raised beds most of the time. Your nutrients will flush through the soil. So yes, you will need to add fertilizer.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Any other questions out there from folks?
One more.
Well, I see that one, but I'm going to try to just see if there's any other, if our folks that have tuned in have any questions.
Okay.
You guys, raise your hand or put it in the chat. Anything like that works. While maybe you're chatting and putting your questions in there, I will read this last one, but we do want to hear your questions. So this is from Hung in Katy. I have a flower bed that was once overrun by weeds and grass. I decided to try sheet mulching to smother any weeds and grass. They keep sprouting through the cardboard. What's the best way to tackle this problem? And Sherri, I saw a picture attached to this, and it was nutsedge.
Oh, okay. And nutsedge is a real invasive weed that will come through weed barriers and cardboard. You really need to address the problem. I always tell people you can use something to kill it, right? You can use a sedge killer to kill it, but don't fix the underlying problem, which is probably some compaction and maybe even a moisture issue. It's holding water under in that area. The nutsedge will keep coming back. So we want to really address that issue too, by putting a real high quality compost and maybe some humic acid to start breaking up that compaction layer. And then bring and raising it up. Then if it comes through to kill the control over it, else it will always be a problem in your garden. So cardboard is not going to stop the problem. We've got to address what's happening under that ground.
Yeah, for sure.
Danny, do you have anything to add to
that? I mean, I concur. We used a lot of different killers at Herman Park, and the one that really worked the best was Sedgehammer. But right. It's a pretty, controlled substance sort of thing. So, but Laura,
anytime I see a real bad problem with the nutsedge, there is definitely a an underlying moisture problem.
Absolutely. And as if you have loose soils, it's really easy to pull it out. If you have loose soils, it's when you have that compaction problem and it's super hard to pull out. Well, Wink, I'm going to unmute you, and you have a question for Sherri? Wink is asking about the lawn one we did last week. We didn't record that, Wink, but if you email me, I can get in touch with you, or even Facebook message me and get in touch with you and share that presentation with you. So appreciate that question, and good time. So, and then Laura Neff has a question about companion planting. Laura, can you unmute and share your question. Okay, I have unmuted you, Laura, so you can go ahead and ask your question of Sherri. Maybe I don't know how this works, but Laura's question is, are there any veggies that should not be planted together, that should be avoided?
Well, I mean, I'm not an expert on companion planting. That's something I never got into. But I know as far as what you plant in the bed time after time again, you need to change plant families. So, I mean, I do put flowers in my vegetable beds to attract beneficial insects, but I wouldn't put mint with your tomatoes. That might change the flavor, and mint's going to compete with your tomatoes. But so I like I said, I'm not an expert on companion planting. Danny, do you have anything to add to that?
Just the small, I know the small one, there's not really any summer crops that come to mind. Winter crops, the brassicas usually should be not planted near carrots or turnips or beets.
Sure.
The way that they function with the microbial fungi, with the mycorrhizal fungi, ends up being negative for the brassicas. So the carrots will feed off the other one, but nothing of the warm summer things.
No, yeah.
So, yeah. Okay, Melody, do you want to ask your question? I'll just add, she amended her raised bed with rabbit poop. She asked, should I still fertilize once a month?
I'm not sure on the nitrogen charge on the rabbit poop. I would kind of base it on how your plants are responding. If you feel like everything's green and happy and everything's producing, then no need to add extra fertilizer. But if you feel like the rabbit poop is there and your plants just aren't as green as they should be and they're not flowering and setting, then yes, I would start fertilizing. But you know, if it's not broke, don't fix it. If the rabbit poop's working for you, leave it be.
Awesome. Any other questions out there? Sherri, great job. You really kind of covered a lot of information and went deep. I really appreciate it. Yeah, we're getting some good clapping. Way to go.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Sherri, could you address make some comments on the blooming phase of tomatoes? Is there a certain peak weather period that there's more blooms? And if there are fewer than we anticipated, is it this cool weather, or tell us what factors are involved there, please?
So yeah, tomatoes, temperature does play a role in your tomatoes. As far as the cool weather goes, I don't have a problem getting my tomatoes to flower in the cool temperatures. You know, anything 55 or above, they flower really well. It's when we get our nighttime temperatures get over 76 degrees, our fruit production will stop. And so we want to make sure and get our plants healthy and growing, getting our nighttime temperatures get over 76 degrees, which sometimes I'll have fruit set as late as mid-July if we have those weird random cool spells in the evenings through the summer. So it's more the nighttime temperature that's going to affect your fruit set than the daytime temperature. Did that answer, hopefully?
Yes, thank you. And
Okay.
really appreciate all your input. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Thanks for attending.
Well, everybody, really do appreciate you guys tuning in. Sorry, I see Lawrence, do you have a question? Or are you saying hello?
I do. No, I'm saying hello, but I have a question too. So I am looking to start a sweet potato bed at the school, a large bed, maybe 100 square feet. I mean, I call that large compared to what I'm working with right now. You know, maybe 200 square feet, but I've got, you know, just turf grass, you know, St. Augustine. Yeah. Do you have any suggestions on how to get started? you know, with that, I mean, my initial thought was put some cardboard down, put some border, and drop in a mixed soil that maybe is a little higher in sand content, and then plant my slips in there for first season. Anyway, looking for suggestions on that.
Okay. You know, is there Bermuda grass mixed in, or is it just St. Augustine?
I don't think that there's Bermuda in there, but I haven't looked that closely. You know, there's probably some there's probably some nutsedge mixed in there. You know, it's just like a ancillary space on a school campus, so it's just whatever. You know, it gets mowed once a week or so.
Okay. Yeah, it could be problematic. You really need to identify what's in there. The nutsedge needs to be addressed. You know, whether you're going to pull it or you're going to spray something, needs to be addressed, because it will come up and be a problem, especially if you're putting nice soil on top that's going to hold on to some moisture. So just putting the cardboard down is not necessarily going to stop the Bermuda and the nutsedge from coming up. So if it was just a mix of weeds and St. Augustine, I'd say go for it with the cardboard. Put your sandy mix on top. The sweet potatoes are super easy to grow in pretty much any soil. They're super easy, but address the nutsedge and the Bermuda grass first before you build your garden.
And that was, I kind of got in just about 10 minutes ago and I heard you talking about nutsedge and maybe using some kind of herbicide or something. Is that kind of along the same lines, what might need to be done in this setting?
You might, but I would be hesitant on spraying the chemical and growing food that fast, especially in a kid's garden, because some of those chemicals can be kind of harsh. So you really need to address the problem, which is the compaction, maybe pull and remove if you can, and then maybe plan for the future and work on the nutsedge now, and then get good compost in there and plan for next year.
So maybe solarize now, like put some plastic down and just hit it.
Yeah, you can try the solarization. That would probably be a lot healthier to do long term, where you're going to grow food. The problem is that nutsedge can rebound even after solarization's happened.
Yeah, the Bermuda will suffer from it. It could even rebound after it. What is there a reason to actually remove all of those weeds? I mean, you could just kind of make mounds for the sweet potatoes with your great soil, grow them in the mounds. They'll start to move the soil around. And that might be, don't worry about the weeds and just grow the sweet potatoes. When it comes time to harvest, you'll be taking them all out anyway from the soil and washing them off and drying them off. That might be what I tend to do. Let them kind of outcompete the weeds and grow over the weeds.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, because they make the aggressive vine.
So put the soil down and then just pile it high to outcompete the weeds.
Yeah, see my arms? It's a perfect example of the weeds.
Oh, you're not
this
giving
is
me
a
like
sweet potato crop back here. You can see the mounds growing, live action back there. No, that's a painting. I'm just kidding. Yeah, that's a great way to grow them if you can't do containers, to do mounds. And maybe don't even have to worry about the weeds.
Yeah.
All right.
But check out how bad your nutsedge is first.
For sure.
Yeah, well, it's all over the place, so it's going to be there too.
Yeah.
Parts of the world, they call those earth almonds. Because the nuts are edible once processed.
Yeah. Be pretty hungry. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Oh, yeah, thank you. Okay, everybody, we are going to wrap up. Sherri has a great Facebook page. Plants for All Seasons has a phenomenal Facebook page. Home Show Garden Pros has a great Facebook page. Oba has a great Facebook page. On behalf of Plants for All Seasons, Home Show Garden Pros, and Oba, we're so glad you guys are here. And we will see you next week. We'll be talking about generally the impact of organics on your health and how to kind of really stay healthy by doing what you like to do in your backyard. So actually, Mike Sarant is here. Mike, want to give us a preview of next week?
Well, let's see. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sorry I put you on the spot there a little bit.
That's right. I think this is fantastic, and my thanks to you and Sherri and Sarah for doing this. Another wonderful job. So next week we're going to look at all the ways that Mother Nature surely and freely heals us all. This is just a great time to love and respect the wonderful bounty and health that nature gives us. Let's love her, let's respect her, let's treat her with kindness. Let's grow great, clean, healthy food like Sherri's talking about. And we'll see civilization from end of the globe to around the world become a healthier, more dynamic civilization. That's what we're shooting for.
That is the dream. Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I'm looking forward to it.
Yep, me too. Thank you.
Thanks, guys, for listening.
Yes, thank you all. And this has been another kind of OBA webinar during this tough time. So thanks, Sherri. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.